When I was 14 years old, I experienced for the first time in my life what it feels like to have a stalker shadowing your every move. The stalker was this kid named Lucas from school, and he was a year younger than me. He was a loner and did really bad in school. When he first began following me around, my friends and I just laughed it off and made jokes about it. At the time, I couldn't have possibly imagined that he'd be stalking me for the next 2 years, or should I say 4. 2 or 4, that'll become clearer as I tell the story. When the school day comes to an end, I head south on Hunter Avenue to go home, and my stalker should be heading north on the same road if it's to go to his place. But to my disgust, he'd always follow me south. I would always walk home with my best friend, but on the rare days when she stayed home sick, I had to walk home alone with my stalker some dozen steps behind me. He would sometimes walk right next to me, and I would walk faster to avoid him. Most of the times he did back up a little, but there were times when he tried to match my speed, and that really scared me to death. I tried speaking to him several times, but he never answers, and all he does is follow me until I get home. As soon as I get inside the house and look out the window, he stays on the sidewalk for about a minute until he leaves for the day. The stalking didn't stop on weekends. He always showed up at least once, both on Saturday and Sunday. So one day during summer vacation, the weather was beautiful and I was getting ready to go to the park to meet up with some friends. I stepped outside and Lucas wasn't around. What a nice way to start a day, I thought, and slowly jogged toward the park. About halfway there, a van pulls over ahead of me. The driver gets out of the car and says to me, "Can I ask you for directions?" I respond, "Yeah, of course. What's the address?" He walks up to me a little too close for comfort, and so I take a step backward. "Whoops, my bad, I'm sorry." "That's okay, so what's the address?" "Yeah, I'm trying to get to the Alliance Church. I need to make a delivery there." The man looks skittish, and I'm starting to feel a little uncomfortable. I slowly back away as I answer, "Just keep driving in the direction you were headed, and you have to make a left at..." I stop talking because I sense something's not right with him. He takes a step forward for every step I back away. That's when I hear someone banging on the rear of the van, and the man runs away, gets in the car, and drives off in a blink of an eye. I look to my left and see Lucas standing there. He doesn't say anything and is just there. I want to go home, so I turn around and start walking. Lucas follows right behind me, and a few minutes later, I'm standing in front of my house. I go up to Lucas, grab his hand, and tell him, "Thank you, I think you just saved my life." Lucas pulls his hand out of my grasp and takes a step backward. I thank him one more time, get inside the house, look out the window, and just as he always had, he waited outside for a minute and left for the day after that. I called my parents right after, and we called the police to report the incident. The cops took my statement, and that was pretty much it, because the creep in the van never returned to my town. Lucas continued to follow me home, or should I say escort me home, for the remainder of high school. Eventually, I began dating and had a boyfriend. My new boyfriend didn't really like Lucas much, but after I explained to him how Lucas saved my life one time, he promised not to say anything to Lucas, even though it must have been awkward for him to walk me home while Lucas was doing the same. That was 4 years ago, and today I'm in college out of state. My parents had moved to a smaller house in a different neighborhood after my brother and I both left for college. I haven't seen Lucas ever since I began college, but I still think about him time to time. Like how ironic it was that the guy who creeped me out for the first 2 years of high school ended up saving my life. I hope he's doing well. I really mean that. I'm 28 years old today, so the story I'm about to tell you took place almost 20 years ago when I was 9. My dad was laid off from his job when I was 7. Then a couple of months later, he bought a coin laundromat, and by the time I turned 9, the business had gone under. We were dead broke, so we sold our house, then moved to a shitty neighborhood. When I say shitty, I don't mean that it was crime-ridden or that people who lived there were shitty. I say that because I'm used to living in big cities, and this new neighborhood was in the middle of Nowheresville, USA. We had moved during spring break. Consequently, I couldn't make any friends initially. The house smelled really bad, TV reception was awful, and so I played alone outside for the most part. On the third day, I took the bicycle out for a ride and rode it all the way to this small playground near the edge of the town. It was all forest toward the back of the playground, and it looked as though it hasn't been looked after for a long time. Only one swing was intact, the slide was all rusty, and yet there were some kids playing there. I guess it really shouldn't have surprised me, seeing as how there was absolutely nothing to do in that town. After all, shitty playground is better than no playground at all. But anyhow, the fun seemed like more of a one-sided affair for the kids at the playground. 3 of the kids were actually bullying one other kid. One of the bullies kept shouting, "Donny, catch the ball, you idiot! I'm trying to give it back to you." And they would throw what looked like a volleyball very hard at the bullied kid, or Donny. The bullies kept at it for like 5 minutes until Donny seemed to give up. He sat on the ground and let the other kids have a field day on him. They kept throwing the ball at his head, and Donny just took it. It was probably the smart thing to do too, since the bullies got bored, and one of them kicked the ball into the forest, then said, "Go fetch, you shithead." The 3 bullies gave me a nasty glance as they left the playground. It was only after they left that Donny got up and went into the forest to retrieve the ball. I went up to the only intact swing and pulled on the line to make sure it could take my weight. It did. I sat there gently swinging back and forth, thinking about my old house, my old friends, and everything else that I missed of the old neighborhood. Some 5 minutes passes when Donny runs out of the forest, then rushes toward me. He then grabs my hand and says, "Come on, we gotta hide." At first, I'm like, what the hell is wrong with this kid? But then I quickly realize, shit, it's got to be a fucking bear or maybe a pack of coyotes. I follow Donny's lead as he takes me toward a rusty junk of a car. He crawls underneath the chassis and gestures with his hand for me to do the same. We are both hiding underneath the chassis of the rusty junk when someone says,
"Donny, catch the ball, you idiot! Donny, Donny!"
Donny looks at me and puts his index finger over his mouth. He really didn't have to, as I'm scared out of my mind and I could hardly breathe, let alone talk. It's getting dark quickly, and that's when something big, black and furry came out of the forest. It is standing on 2 legs, but it looks more like a dog or a wolf. It sniffs the air like an animal, as if it's trying to track its prey. Then it speaks again.
"Donny, Donny, Donny, I'm trying to give it back to you. Catch the ball, you idiot! Donny, catch the ball, you idiot! Donny!"
It kept at it, going back and forth, sniffing, growling, and smashing its hands on the slide. I don't know exactly how long after, but eventually the thing left, and both Donny and I slid out of the junk. We first returned to town as quickly as we could. I then asked Donny just what the hell it was that we saw. He explained to me that it's a creature which only comes out at night, and that he was equally surprised because he never saw it venture out of the forest in daylight. He didn't know the name of the creature nor what it was, but he said it abducted adults and children alike. Donny's grandpa told him that the creature targets the elderly, the drunk, and children who are unlucky and dumb enough to roam near the forest at night. It skins its victims alive, then devours them while they are still breathing and feeling every bite and slash. Everyone who's lived in this town for at least a few years know there's something in the forest, but no one publicly acknowledges its existence, even though they all take necessary precautions at night. It's like the boogeyman your parents tell you don't exist, yet secretly they fear the darkness and the things that hide in them. Later that night, I told my parents about what happened, and of course they didn't believe me. They asked the town folks about it in the coming days, and all the other adults told them that there were opportunistic wild animals roaming the forest, and that in some rare instances they would venture as far as the edge of the forest. They warned my parents to never go outside alone after dark. Fortunately for us, we didn't stay there long enough to come across the damn thing again. We lived in that neighborhood for another 6 months, and I made sure to always come home before it's dark. I think my parents believed we had wild animals near the town, so they took precautions at night as well. 6 months later, we got the hell out of there and moved into a neighborhood with no dense forest nearby. Make of it what you will, but I know I saw a talking wolf that day. Obviously, it wasn't a wolf, but that's the animal it resembled the most. Only it was standing on 2 legs and repeating the things the bully said to Donny. It's been so long since the day I saw it, but I still get weak in the knees when I recall its voice. I've got a twin brother who looks identical to me, but our personalities couldn't be more different. I smile a lot, but my brother never does. I've got lots of friends, but my twin doesn't believe in friendship. I'm a jean shirt kind of a guy, but my brother's closet is full of black suits. I think you can tell where I'm trying to go with this. Basically, I've got a very cheerful personality, and my brother is the most serious, darkest person I know. Growing up, I saw Joe, that's his name, do some of the most awful things to people and animal. He once killed a kitten by putting it inside a plastic bag filled with water. I was too late by the time I caught him doing it. I got the kitten out of the bag and tried to give it CPR, but I couldn't revive it. I told my parents of the incident, but they made me promise to never tell anyone about it, and they said they would try to get professional help for Joe. They began taking Joe to see a shrink, but it didn't help. He was still the same evil prick. This one time, we were riding in a packed bus, and I saw Joe pull out a small knife. With no hesitation, he stabbed a woman's thigh twice and quickly squeezed himself into a crowd further away from her. She was bleeding profusely underneath the white skirt, but of course no one was looking for a kid with a bloody blade. I stopped talking to him by around the age of 11 or 12. I hated his guts, but I hated my parents even more for not locking him up in a mental institution where he belonged. By the time college enrollment came along, I made sure I would go to a school as far away as possible from my brother. Joe ended up going to a school in New York, and I got accepted to UCLA. Going our separate ways to college is probably the happiest memory of my life. I met my future wife in college, Dana, who is my wife in the present time. Regrettably, she had the displeasure of meeting my brother in our 3rd year in college. I practically begged my parents to never bring him along when they come visit me in LA, but they had that year. The 2 hours I had spent with them in a restaurant was the most uncomfortable, distasteful, and the most distressing 2 hours of my life. My parents were so happy, telling me how much Joe had changed. Sure, Joe smiled and mingled, but I knew it was all an act. It wasn't so much a real change, but it was more like him adapting and learning to survive in this world. I saw him slowly making those changes from high school. He would stand in front of a mirror and practice smiling. He would also try talking in a higher pitched voice. The thing that really bothered me was the fact that he was trying to mimic my personality and gestures. It disgusted me that someone who looked exactly like me tried to take away the only thing that was unique to me from him. So imagine how I must have felt when I saw his eyes light up as soon as he saw Dana. He spoke to her almost exactly the way I would. He could make her laugh and engage her in conversation just like I could. It was almost as if the only thing he did through college was perfecting being me. Anyhow, after dinner, my parents told me they wanted to stay an extra day in LA, but I made up a lie and told them I couldn't see them the next day even if they stayed. My brother asked for Donna's number and they even asked her to show him around town, but I intervened and told them we were both busy the next day. That was the last time I saw my brother, as I didn't even invite him to my wedding. I rarely contacted my parents after graduating college because they would always try to push me to get closer to Joe. The only things my parents knew about me were my phone number and that I lived in Miami. So how in the hell did Joe find me and Dana? Apparently, he moved to an apartment only 5 blocks away from Dana's office, and he showed up to her place of work the other day. I met up with him separately and warned him to stay away from both me and Dana. At first, he tried to convince me that it was all a coincidence, but he knew I could see right through him. After all, I know him better than anyone in this world, and he probably feels the same way about me. Before leaving his apartment, I said to Joe, "Keep away from us, you sick fuck. I ain't playing games with you, so don't even try with me." I was about to slam the door behind me when Joe said, "You know, I never thought I'd want anything from you, but now I do, and you know how I get when I can't have what I want." I slammed the door and didn't let him finish what he was saying. I didn't have to hear it. I knew what he wanted to say. I should have recorded our conversation, should have tried to collect some kind of evidence, but at that point in time, I was too emotionally charged to think of something like that. I've got a psychotic brother who I always believed to be a sociopath, seeking to take away the most important person in my life. I have no legal means to keep him away from Dana, and this become too sophisticated in his act to try to prove to anyone that it's insane. I've been talking to Dana about living abroad for a few years, experiencing different cultures and meeting different people before we settled down for good. It took 2 months for her to make up her mind, but we finally decided to move to an undisclosed country, and we are currently residing there. My hope is that she'll grow fond of this place so much that she'll never want to leave, because if we ever return to the stateside, the nightmare will begin all over again. That is the end of this video, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to say a quick thank you to Mandy, James, and Jeff for the stories. Hopefully the rewrite was to their satisfaction. And also, let me remind all of you to send in your stories if you got something spooky for me. You can send them at mrcreepymaster1@gmail.com, and I assure you that the stories will no longer take a millennium to be published, as I no longer do interviews for every single one of the stories. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay safe.